Good morning to you all and a very warm welcome to Shabbat at the House. My name is Natalie Kendel and I will be your host for today. In case you're new to our group, the house is a house church. We often get together on Saturdays for what is called Shabbat at the House. Coming up today, we will be sharing some music and singing together. We will be exploring a story found in the book of Amos, and we will have a time of prayer together as well. And that's a bit of what you can expect during your time with us this morning. Before we jump into all of that, I have a couple of pieces of information to share with you. Firstly, you are currently watching this on our official YouTube channel. And if you'd like to subscribe, then you'll be alerted to future events and uploads as well. Please also feel free to consult and follow our social media accounts on Facebook and Instagram. There we post what's happening and when, so you won't miss out. We are also a nonprofit, so if you'd like to show us support and help us keep doing what we're doing, you can support us through PayPal, the details of which are on the screen, or become a patron on our Patreon, where you'll have access to new and exclusive content. With the support of our patrons such as Shairon and Elizabeth, we can keep doing what we're doing, everything from visual media, music, sound editing, research, and so on. And even when you simply share our videos online, you are supporting us there too. So thank you very much. Secondly, in case you missed it, we'd like to share with you something called Read Aloud Corner. At Read Aloud Corner, we make audiobooks available to enjoy on YouTube. We pick really good stories and share these books. In the past, for example, I've read through the 7-book series of the Chronicles of Narnia, and I'm currently reading through the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis. So if you'd like to have something to look forward to at the end of the day or listen to while you're out and about, then you can click on the YouTube playlist in the description below, and I hope you enjoy listening. If you do have a book you'd like us to read together, you can send us your wish on Read Aloud Corner's Facebook page. Thirdly, speaking of books, we'd like to make a recommendation. To recommend 2 people worth checking out in your own time. The first is an author called Brian Zahnd. Brian is a pastor and has written numerous books, including A Farewell to Mars and Sinners in the Hands of a Loving God. Much of his content is a thoughtful deconstruction of many of the damaging and faulty trends that sadly rear their heads in common evangelical theology and a lot of church culture in the West. In many of his books, he takes issue, for example, with the harsh misrepresentation of the gospel, such as this common and contaminating narrative of an angry Father God who can only be satisfied with blood and violence, and who sends his son to be a sort of whipping boy for humanity. You may have heard some version of this narrative recently during this past Passover. And if you'd like to get a feel for Brian Zahn's writing and content, I can suggest checking out some of his quotes on goodreads.com. And secondly, I can also recommend checking out Zach W. Lambert. His Instagram handle is as seen on the screen. The work he's doing on social justice matters and working towards full inclusion in his pastoral work is excellent. And his posts are filled with worthwhile ideas. There are some real mic drop moments in there. He's definitely worth giving a follow on Instagram and Twitter if you're on there. And lastly, all songs sung at Shabbat at the House can be found and downloaded at nataliekendel.bandcamp.com if you'd like to listen to these songs again or find similar songs or download the music. That's it for the information bits. Let's sing together Act Justly, a song based on Micah chapter 6, verse 8.
show. Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. He has shown you humanity, what he has asked of us. In our work and our home, in the leading of government, may we act with integrity, in public alone. When in love we engage with the people around us, we become living images, all worshiping God. Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. He has shown you humanity, what he has asked of us. Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. He has shown you humanity, what he has asked of us.
Our next song is called No Liturgy.
No liturgy can conjure up your presence. No words can bind your will to any man.
We are going to talk with God now, and He will hear us like we just sang, not because our liturgy is a certain way or because we speak the right words, but because He invites us consistently to honest communication. And as C.S. Lewis wrote, we must lay before Him what is in us, not what ought to be in us. Lord, I'd like to invite you to inspire us this morning with new light and ideas that are uplifting and helpful, and also with the courage of honesty. You know each person here, how they feel, what they long for, how we're all doing, what's on our minds. Please bring comfort to those in pain, encouragement to those who need it, wisdom and clarity to those who are looking for that. Let us be good friends to our friends, good allies to the oppressed, and good listeners to those we engage with. Please affirm to us now that whatever we each bring into this space, whether it is confusion, questions, rage, joy, excitement, or loneliness, that there isn't an emotion or a complaint or a thought that is too big for you to handle. They don't threaten you, and they don't threaten to cancel your unwavering acceptance of us. Please let your Spirit comfort those who would like that. Please lead and help those who would like that this morning. Thank you for hearing the prayers and the hopes and the fears we might not speak aloud. Let it be so. Now it is time for us to dive into our story for today. Our story today is found in the book of Amos, chapter 4. Now, Amos may be a book in the Bible that is less familiar to us than some others. It's a fairly short book, written by and about the ministry of a prophet named Amos. And there usually isn't a lot of time or attention spent on this book, whether in Bible studies or sermons. But today we're going to have a look at it, for the book of Amos is far from insignificant. So, to start us off, who was Amos and what did he do? Well, the opening lines of the book tell us, chapter 1, verse 1, "These are the words of Amos, one of the shepherds of Tekoa, containing the vision he saw about Israel, when Uzziah was the king of Judah and Jeroboam son of Jehoash was king of Israel." So right off the bat, we're given a bit of historical context. Number 1, we are told that Amos started out as a shepherd. Number 2, that he lived in a place called Tekoa, which is found in Judah. Thirdly, we are told that he lived during the time when the country was split into 2 separate kingdoms, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. We're also given the time period based on the particular kings who were ruling. And finally, we're also told that even though Amos came from Judah, the prophetic messages he spoke were concerning the northern kingdom of Israel. So his prophetic message is about and directed at Israel. Now, with that bit of context in mind, let's turn to chapter 4, where we will explore one of Amos's prophecies. Chapter 4, verse 1. "Hear this word, you cows of Bashan, who live on Mount Samaria, you women who oppress the poor and crush the needy, and say to your husbands, bring us some drinks." At the beginning of this prophecy, found in chapter 4, we're told who it is being addressed to. Like a letter would begin, "Dear so-and-so," this prophecy is aimed at a specific audience. Who is the prophecy addressed to? Well, let's break down the description of the audience found in the text. "Hear this word, you cows of Bashan, who live on Mount Samaria, you women who oppress the poor and crush the needy, and who say to your husbands, bring us some drinks. Amos here seems to be addressing certain women who live on Mount Samaria. But there was a bit more to that description than merely where they live, wasn't there? When I was at university studying theology, one of my professors walked into the classroom early in the morning at the beginning of our lesson, faced us all and said, "Good morning, you cows of Bashan." I can promise you that upon hearing this, the chatter stopped instantly. Now, that was my professor's way of introducing the study we were about to begin on the book of Amos. But those words, they really grab you, don't they? Because in this text, Amos is addressing women who live on Mount Samaria, and he's calling these women cows of Bashan. Now, if you walked into a room today and addressed all the women there as cows, how do you think that would go down? Quite rightly, you'd be called insulting and out of order because there's a present-day attached cultural meaning which is deeply sexist and dehumanizing. It's easy to read this text in Amos chapter 4 with our modern eyes. It's easy to assume that Amos is perhaps using the term cows the way someone might today who is aiming a sexist insult at women. But is that what Amos is doing? What did the term cows of Bashan mean? Let's dig a little deeper to find out. Bashan was actually a name of a place. It referred to the pasture lands which lay east of Jordan and east of the Sea of Galilee. Today it goes by another name, the Golan Heights. These pastures were known far and wide for being particularly rich, green and luscious. And that's why cattle was kept there, to roam this green land, to graze on the grass and get strong and fat. In fact, that cattle kept at Bashan was famous in Israel. Even King David in one of his psalms makes reference to them, riding the strong bulls of Bashan in Psalms 22:12. And so because this place was well known in those days, to call someone a cow of Bashan would immediately conjure up a certain image in an Israelite's mind. An image of these well-fed, lazy, lounging, taken care of cows, surrounded by lushness and excess and comfort. Now, this isn't a reference to the women's weight, since the then beauty standards of a woman was very different from our Western beauty standards today. And the ideal at that time was not necessarily being skinny or the slimmest woman. So likening the women of Samaria to Bashan cows isn't a stab at their gender, nor at their weight, but at the excess, the luxury, and the wealth of these women. The second descriptor in the prophecy is that the women in question live on Mount Samaria. Samaria was the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel, the royal city, just like Jerusalem was the capital city of Judah in the south. And Samaria was built around and on a mountain called Mount Samaria. You may very well remember that years later, Jesus would engage with a woman by a well who was a Samaritan woman. The later descendants of the northern kingdom were called Samaritans, and if you recall, the woman by the well refers to how Samaritans worship God on Mount Samaria and not in Jerusalem like the Judeans do. So that's our location, the capital city. Amos is talking to a specific group of women living in the capital, the aristocratic ladies, wives of the government officials, of judges, men of the royal court, of the rich and powerful men of Samaria, the upper class. Amos is aiming his message at the wealthy matrons of Israel. These women are the leading women in the land. The third descriptor of these women is as follows: you women who oppress the poor and crush the needy. During the time of Amos, there was a period of great optimism and prosperity in the northern kingdom. Wealth was booming, the economic circumstances were close to ideal, there were no wars being fought, the land was rich with food and wine, and the capital Samaria was said to be running over with gold and silver. So why then is there mention here of the poor and the needy? Well, the rest of Amos' prophecies answers that question for us, because it seems that something was going on in Israel beneath the surface, behind the curtain of appearances. Earlier, Amos 2:6-7 says, "They sell the innocent for silver, and the needy for a pair of sandals, grinding the heads of the poor into the dust, and pushing the lowly out of the way." Hold on, they sell the innocent. People selling people. God is confronting a sin of Israel, slavery. Specifically, slavery due to unpaid debts. Becoming a slave was not a new thing, not in Israel and not in the greater Middle East. How might one become a slave in those days? Well, what often happened was something like this. A man named Simeon is a wheat farmer, but one year the crop is bad, and because of this, he doesn't have the income he needs to survive. Maybe he owes some people money, maybe he had to borrow from a wealthy landowner to feed his family that year, and this leads to him falling into debt. How is Simeon going to pay back what he owes? Well, he and others like him would do this by working for those he owed money to. So today, if you go to a restaurant and you can't pay your bill at the end of the meal, you might be forced to do dishes for the rest of the evening to pay off the cost of your meal. And in the same way, Simeon and others in Israel would work for the people they were indebted to until their debt was paid off. This is called economic slavery or indentured servitude. But you see, God made very clear rules about this type of debt from the beginning. Laws that would guard against systemic economic oppression leading to slavery. He established such a law even before Israel became a nation. Before the Israelites even settled in the Promised Land, foreseeing this very problem, God made the 7-year rule. We can read one example of this is referenced in Exodus 21, verse 2. When you buy a male Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, but on the 7th he will become a free person without debt. So, let's imagine again our friend Simeon. Imagine he owes so much money that even if he worked for 300 years, he could never pay off his debt. And so now, not only is Simeon going to be a slave for the rest of his life, but his family is too. His sons, his daughters will be owed by their father's creditor. They will have to work for the person Simeon owes, perhaps for the rest of their lives, and maybe their children and their children's children. This is how generations of economic slaves came about in those days, generations of inherited debt, inherited poverty. And this is something that happens to people still today all the time. They are late on payments or they have to borrow, but because of crazy high interest rates or their life circumstances, they can never get out from under that debt. Meaning, because of the way the system is set up, the poor are condemned to permanently be poor, with no or little hope of escape. But that, you see, is what God's 7-year law was meant to put a stop to. God was saying very clearly, no person shall be made a slave and crushed under poverty and debts their whole lives. No person shall be stuck and unable to escape. The society in Israel was not meant to be a system that keeps the poor poor, that benefits from free labor because of an unjust system. The 7-year law made it so that people, no matter how great their debts were, would have those debts completely deleted after 6 years. They would be debt-free and a free person. So no matter how much Simeon still owes, after 6 years his debts are automatically gone, wiped out forever. Imagine what powerful hope such a law could offer if it existed in our world today. Now, God's accusations leveled against Israel was that they'd stopped keeping the 7-year law. As was described in Amos 2, they sell the innocent for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. They're selling, in fact, people for fashion, so they can buy a pair of new shoes, grinding the heads of the poor into the dust and pushing the lowly out of the way. The Israelites aren't releasing people from their debts. They are selling people into slavery in order to make a profit, a free workforce to increase their own wealth. This is what is happening behind the curtain in Israel's time of peace and prosperity. This is the dark hidden truth, the wealth gap in Israel. Even during a time of abundance, poverty is rampant. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, because the wealthy are benefiting from unforgiven debts and enforced endless slavery. And now we see the true colors of the women of Samaria. Their crime isn't that they're chilling out or drinking or saying to their husbands, "Bring us some drinks," because they happen to be closer to the kitchen than the women are. It's not even that they're wealthy. It's that they're wealthy at the expense of the poor, at the cost of slaves, benefiting from a corrupt system. Just like the cows of Bashan, they are prosperous, luxuriating, while they and their husbands, the elite aristocracy of Samaria, are crushing the poor and the vulnerable. This is the audience Amos is addressing in chapter 4. What then is God's message to the cows of Bashan? Verse 4 and 5. Go to Bethel and commit crimes. Go to Gilgal and commit yet more. Bring your sacrifices every morning, your tithes every 3 days. Burn leavened bread as a thank offering. Brag in public about your charitable giving, because that's what you love to do, Israel, says the sovereign Lord. Hold on. This next passage is a bit confusing. On the one hand, I thought that these wealthy women were villains, mean, rich people who break God's laws. But in the text, they are described also as bringing sacrifices every morning, giving tithes, making thank offerings, and charitable giving. What devout cows these seem to be. These actions in themselves sound like the behavior of good and law-keeping Israelites, even a list of things which are admirable and generous. So why are they being leveled as accusations? Well, let's have a closer look at this list. First on the list, bringing sacrifices. This refers to sacrificing animals in the temple or on built altars, often to function as an atonement for one's sins. But Israelites generally didn't do this every morning. Imagine if all the people in the whole country did, there'd be no animals left in Israel. Now, in general, one would bring an animal to be sacrificed on the Day of Atonement in the least, one day in the year, to cover you and your family's sins for the entire year that has passed. And then sometimes a sacrifice might be made on a certain or special occasion or event after an illness, but certainly not every morning. So immediately something stands out here as being unusual, an excessive amount of sacrificing. Number 2 on the list, giving tithes, specifically described as giving tithes every 3 days. Tithes referred to when Israelites would give 10% of their income back to God and those serving in the priestly ministry. There were a couple of types of tithes, but again, in general, a tithe was given once or twice a year for each of the 2 yearly harvests in spring and in autumn. But not every week, and certainly not, as is described in these verses, every 3 days. Third on the list, burning leavened bread as a thank offering. The Israelites, to commemorate the day of Passover, would eat unleavened bread, which means bread without yeast, bread which hasn't been allowed to rise. And this was to remember how the night before God brought their ancestors out of slavery in Egypt, they were told to eat unleavened bread and then burn whatever was left over, whatever wasn't eaten. This was to communicate the certainty of their departure from Egypt the next day. So basically, eat bread that can be made quickly, and then don't save your leftovers in the fridge, burn them, because you're 100% leaving Egypt tomorrow. But it would appear that now the people in Samaria are burning leavened bread as a kind of thank offering to God, even though yeast was not allowed in any sacrifice offered on fire. This is referenced, for example, in Leviticus 7:13 and 23:17. Now, why were the women of Samaria burning bread with yeast in it as a thanks to God? It doesn't really make sense. Because firstly, it was against the law to do so. And secondly, if you've ever baked bread, you know very well that allowing dough to rise takes more time. It takes more effort. It requires more ingredients, and you need to wait for the yeast to take effect before you can bake it. Unleavened bread was often the regularly eaten bread of the poor, because it requires very little ingredients and takes little time to make. Leavened bread, bread with yeast, was more common in households that had more money. So if you can imagine, poorer people would eat something like pita bread, flat, simple, quick to make, while wealthier people would have the time and money to eat the fluffiest of bread, bread with yeast in it. But why would God be unhappy with this more fancy, more pricey gift which took more effort to make? Surely fluffy bread would be better. And last on our list, charitable giving, specifically bragging about said giving. Now, someone might say, yes, bragging, that bit isn't the greatest, but at least they're giving to the poor, right? I'm sure those stricken by poverty don't care if Bill Gates posts about how generous he is on Instagram, as long as his money is being donated and gets to them. So again, why are these behaviors referred to as crimes and leveled as accusations? The answer can be summed up as empty ritualism. The women of Samaria are, yes, going the extra mile to do what the law asks of them. They are, to the perceiving eye, overachievers. They give in excess. If the law asks them to bring a sacrifice once a year, they are painted as doing it every morning. If the law asks them to give tithes twice a year, they are giving it every 3 days. If others are thanking God with poor flat bread, they are saying thanks with fluffy unleavened bread. And if it's a good thing to give to those less fortunate than ourselves, then let's make a big deal out of it. People should know what we're doing. The women of Samaria may seem like generous, charitable, lavish worshippers who don't do the bare minimum but go above and beyond what is asked of them. But beneath the surface, their acts of thanksgiving or worship are merely rituals, meant to look good, meant to make them look good. And why are they mere empty rituals? Well, because prayers and sacrifices do not make up for unjust behavior. Amos is saying, women of Samaria, you can do all this stuff in the temple on Sabbath that look good, that even might be argued to be good, but you are still not only benefiting from a system which is crushing the poor and the vulnerable, but you are actively perpetuating it. Thus, all that other stuff becomes empty obeisance, empty ritualism. Carrying out a ritual you think will put you in the clear, will make up for you, or will cover what you're doing in your daily life. God is saying, acting justly is more important than religious ritual. He later concludes in chapter 5, verse 21 to 24, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring the most expensive fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps. But let justice roll on like a river, doing what is right like a never-failing stream. God was saying, stop your performance, stop the singing, stop your song teams, your music, your sacrifices, your religious celebrations, your Sabbath assemblies. Acting out ceremonial ritual has no intrinsic value. Religious rituals and even apparent law-keeping becomes not only irrelevant, but irreverent when social justice is abandoned. It becomes a sin, something that distances us from what is right, because social justice is at the heart of the law. If the heart of it is abandoned, then other actions become profane. The Sumerian women were exemplifying empty religion because they had abandoned social justice and masked it with excessive religious performance. This resulted in empty ritualism. God was saying, instead of making all those sacrifices, charitable giving, thanksgiving, and praises to me, assembling together each week to sing and play your harps, go fix your corrupt system. Go forgive the debts of your poor, release your slaves, defend the vulnerable, stand up for them, because acting justly is more important than ritual. Has our religion become affected with empty ritualism? Are we ever like the women of Samaria? Do we think that we can spend the whole week talking behind our co-workers' back, allowing economic injustice, ignoring racism, belittling our spouse, screaming at our children, buying clothes made by slaves, being apathetic about bullies, and turning a blind eye to social injustice? But as long as we come to church on Sabbath and wear the right clothes and sing praise songs about how good God is till our throats are sore, give tithes, attend church programs, read the Bible from cover to cover, and generously donate to charities, that what we're doing is okay? Do we think that because corrupt church leaders open and close our meetings with a prayer, that God is magically on our side and guiding our choices and leading us? Can we oppress the outcast and be apathetic in the face of abuse and still claim we care about God's way? Can our obsession with appearances and outward religious piety ever cover up the abandoning of justice? Some of us may want to change. We may want to do what is right and not be driven by empty rituals, but we don't know where to begin. We might think, well, I'm not an aristocratic millionaire from Samaria. I don't have the money, the time, the resources, the power to help the poor or the needy or the outcast. And I certainly don't have the power to end the systems which keep them poor. But the truth is, you don't have to be a millionaire. You don't have to be the master of the world to do something in the world, because you and I inhabit one small corner of this planet. We aren't responsible for everything, but we're responsible for something. Perhaps it's a classroom. Perhaps it's a ward of patients. Maybe it's your children at home, or employees at your business, or the stranger you pass on the street, or simply being responsible for your own tongue and what it says. The choices we make feed or starve a system. Whether that system is systemic racism, economic slavery, institutional corruption, bullying, or greed, we are constantly casting a vote. Our choices vote for what's in the world, vote for what gets a platform. The way we respect our children, how well or poorly we listen, the way we speak to our enemies, the way we shop, the people we give our attention to, the websites we click on, the people we speak up for and defend, or the times we stand back and just watch. We are constantly voting. A politician can spout all the xenophobic garbage he wants to, but if no one listens, he's just a man talking to himself. A fashion brand can try to sell cheap clothes made by child slave labor in India or labor camps in China, but if no one buys their clothes, they'll go out of business. A church board member can use scare tactics, throw around his power and bully all he likes. If everyone stands up to protect and defend the spiritually abused and show that church board member the door, he is cut off. In the face of unjust systems, we can quickly feel powerless, overwhelmed, and alone. But we're not. None of us are alone, and what we do matters. What we do has an effect, even if it seems small in a small corner of the world. Hear this word, you cows of Bashan. There is a better way. And God described it like this: let justice roll on like a river, doing what is right like a never-failing stream. To conclude this thought, let's sing together the song, Forgive Us for Hypocrisy.
Forgive us for hypocrisy, the gap between our words and lives. Oh Father, you the truth itself, come and cast your light upon our lives. Forgive us for our apathy when faced with others' burdens. Create a servant's heart in me. Follow Jesus into service. Forgive us for our arrogance when we hide behind traditions. Come wash our false entitlement with a spirit of humility. Forgive us for unwillingness, for the times we don't respond to you. Oh, thank you for your patient love, where we always find forgiveness.
Thank you all so much for taking part in Shabbat at the house today. I hope all of you experience goodness this week and that we may have the courage to choose kindness and justice, even though it may sometimes be truly difficult. We'll leave you with this final song this morning. Let's sing together, Overcome with Love.
ankles may not bear the weight of cold and metal chains, but our world is still aflood with man's oppressive hate. And just like in the ages past, we need a different call to not be overcome by hate, but overcome with love. We dub our time as civilized, imagine we've evolved, but history is on a loop, a problem we can't solve. How easy to be swept along the current of our fall, but Christ has made a better way to overcome with love. We can't defeat our hate with hate, nor darkness with the dark, but light can fill the largest cell and free imprisoned hearts. So you who are the light of men, inspire in us now to not be overcome by hate, but overcome with love. And all seem to lose the fight, fall victim to the world. Our King shall have the victory and have the final word. So break the chains that bind our hearts, that we may dare your song. Do not be overcome by hate, but overcome with love. So break the chains that bind our hearts, that we may dare your song. Do not be overcome by hate, but overcome with love. Do not be overcome by hate, but overcome with
That's it from us today here at Shabbat at the House. Shabbat Shalom. See you next time.